right now. I can't. But also, losing a little bit of the community too. So it's finding that balance, I think. But
Right.
You're raising a really important point of the groups and stuff. There is a lot of stuff that is going to be overwhelming, and what's enough and yeah. So.
And most people will not know until they're already upset and not breathing that they probably need to stop breathing.
It's not funny, but yeah, oh my goodness, right. Yeah, this is really I can feel this starting to affect me. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think it's important to take a minute, just because we're talking about this and because we're talking about trauma. I want you to notice in this moment and here and now, what's happening with your body, right?
Me personally?
Anybody who's listening.
Anybody who's listening.
Notice what's happening with your body in this exact moment, right?
Yep.
We're talking about a subject that has a certain amount of emotional charge to it. And you might notice a change in your heart rate. You might notice a wonky feeling in your stomach. You might notice your throat clench. You might notice slight clenching in your jaw or something. There are different ways that we physically have a reaction to thoughts and emotions that are a part of it, right? There's a reason why a lot of parents have insomnia. There's a reason why a lot of parents have either constipation or diarrhea or both, because when it comes to things that scare us, your body scans for danger 4 times a second, and things that are frightening are not logical, and things that are frightening are visceral.
Yes.
Your body has a reaction to scary things. If your body did not have a reaction to scary things, then people wouldn't read something that upset them and not be able to sleep the next night. People wouldn't jump on a chair if there was a mouse that came in the room. People wouldn't want to throw up because they're going to have to do public speaking, right?
Yeah.
There's a physical component to it. And it's funny because people will talk a lot about, I think the thought is, if I understand the situation, I should just be logical about it.
Yes.
But then they'll go take medication. And the medication is helping them with physical symptoms, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a disconnect that says, okay, I should be intellectual about this, and that somehow being emotional about this is shameful, or having a physical reaction to what's going on is shameful. But anything that's scary, anything that's threatening is physical and should be physical.
Right.
Because that's how we physically mobilize to protect ourselves and protect our kids. And that reaction needs to be faster than logic. So in terms of how the body is wired, it is wired to react illogically to threat.
Yes. It's wired to react illogically to threat. So in other words, in my understanding, that your body will react in the same way to, like we were talking to, a disturbing Facebook post as it will to, watching your child, or, watching your child seize.
Right.
Right.
It's why people can feel really distressed when they've had a bad dream.
Yes.
Okay. The dream did not happen, was not real, but the dream caused you to have a physical reaction. Okay.
Right.
And so your thoughts can impact your physical reactions, right? Just like if you're listening to this podcast and you notice your stomach got uncomfortable, right?
I know mine did a little bit.
Reaction.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of being able to regulate in this moment, I think it's helpful, if you need to, pause the podcast.
Yes.
Feel your feet on the ground. Notice what it feels like to feel your feet. Look around the room, because probably, unless you're listening to this in the car, which it's entirely possible, if you're sitting in your living room, you're probably in a physically safe room.
You're safe.
So giving your body a chance to look around and notice the present moment is something that you can do periodically to get yourself back into your body in a good way. Mm-hmm. Because the most important thing to a person's resilience is to be able to notice when they are safe. If you're going into lots and lots of distressful situations, being able to come back to noticing,
right,
not just intellectually, but being able to physically take in the safety of the moment, the here and now, is critical to your resilience. It's critical to your ability to poop. It's critical to your ability to sleep at night. It's critical to your ability to teach your child how to self-regulate. And it's super, super hard sometimes, understandably, if you're going in and out of crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely hard if you're trying to help your child regulate and your child is physically aggressive.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm. I've experienced that.
Yeah. And so I think that I think there's a real important component to cutting yourself some slack if you are not being logical. And understand that most of the time, your doctors are going to want you to stay logical as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why they're doing that is that they're trying to keep you out of more of a distress reaction. They're trying to keep you regulated.
Mm-hmm.
And telling you to be logical and trying to keep you in that logical pocket is going to be one way to attempt to keep you regulated.
Yes.
And most medical professionals are not trained in how to support a parent when the parent is feeling dysregulated.
Yes.
So that's just an issue in the medical field that we have not addressed, even though it definitely has an impact on the child's physical well-being so that the child can co-regulate with the parent and get some relief in co-regulating with the parent, get some better regulation
right.
regulating with the parent. I think that that's an area where we could potentially do a better job.
Right. And it's hard to train people to treat this type or to help because there's not that many people that are going through these kinds of crises that are trained in trauma therapy, or if they are trained, they're not used to a situation where it continues to occur out of left field at any moment. And I think
I guarantee you that if you want to go find a bunch of distressed parents, go to the children's hospital.
Yeah.
You will see a lot of distressed parents sitting around that cafeteria.
Yep.
And not even in the cafeteria. You go into different rooms. You got a lot of distressed, dysregulated parents.
Oh, yeah.
And understandably.
Yeah.
And sometimes more so than the kids, because sometimes if the kid is dissociative, then your kid will be kind of checked out. But parents will usually not be fully checked out. I mean, you do see parents kind of shut down or whatever, but you also see a lot of parents in more of a hypervigilant, all the alarm bells are going off, emergency kind of place.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Where, like, please somebody help me, or please help my child. There's a lot of
desperation and yeah.
And I think that that's important. I think sometimes if a parent it's really tricky as a parent navigating the medical field, because if you get too emotional, it's hard to get doctors to take what you're saying seriously.
Oh boy. Right.
So you have to be reasonably emotional because you care about your kid. But if you get too emotional, you can't keep them safe anymore because you're no longer taken seriously and you get patronized and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
And so I think as a parent, a lot of times there's an awareness of needing to stay self-regulated for the sake of being able to protect your kid. But at the same time, there's a part of that that's really frustrating and unfair. Yeah. Because a lot of parents, especially if you're a parent whose child has a very specific rare disorder, and the parent is talking to a doctor who's generalist, by and large, that parent knows more about diagnosis than that medical professional. And even with a specialist, you know your kid, right? You live with your kid. You're an expert on your kid. You see your kid all the time. So who's the expert on the kid? The doctor may be the expert on seizures or
on keeping your kid alive,
or kidneys, but the doctor is not the expert on the child in front of them because they're not there all the time, right?
Yeah.
And certainly when it comes to the TAN stuff, if you're talking about how the child self-regulates, the parent's co-regulating with the child. They know a lot about how the child is self-regulating.
Absolutely.
Right?
Right. It's almost as if sometimes we develop it ourselves
Mm-hmm.
as either incidentally or as a coping mechanism.
Well, and that can be an issue that's a big thing too, is when a baby is a baby, the parent and the baby have a period of time in which they figure out that they're two people, but it doesn't happen right away. Okay? Because they were one person for a long time.
Yes.
Okay? Mom and baby were one person for a long time. And there's at some point, the baby becomes aware that they're two different people, and the mom does too. Right?
Yep.
And then over time, that separation gets greater and greater and greater. But if you have a child who is medically complex, and if how the parent is keeping the child safe is to hyper attune, co-regulate, right? They are up in their child's business all the time in order to keep their child safe. It is very difficult for the parent to know that they're two different people. Okay? Because the parent,
it becomes an enmeshed.
Well, their job is to physically see what's going on with the kid to keep them safe. And if the child is nonverbal, they stay up in their child's business a long time because the kid is not going to be able to use words to say something's wrong. They're going to be showing physical symptoms of distress that the parent is helping the child co-regulate. And there's all sorts of stuff with that where it can get really difficult, and it can be a source of frustration for the child too, because the child gets to a point developmentally where they're ready to assert their own will. And the only way that the child can show that they have their own personality and that they have their own interests and their own whatever can sometimes be to be difficult, right?
Right.
I mean, that's what the neurotypical 2s, 3s, and 4s are about. Right? You have a teenager, right?
Right.
They're really showing you that they want to do what they want to do.
Yep.
And
so it's a natural developmental stage that gets hijacked.
It's awesome, and it's critical. It's great when your kid starts asserting their will, but if the parent has learned, I keep my kids safe by being on them.
Right.
And the child starts asserting their will in a way that's developmentally appropriate for them, but is kind of contrary to this mode that the parent has gotten into of protecting their child. They're trying to do the right thing and protect their child. Then there can be a real battle, and there can be a lot of behavioral symptoms that come up because of the parent-child relationship and kind of how that attachment is kind of bumping up against a challenge in being able to kind of grow with the developmental capacities of the child. Right?
Right.
Figuring out, okay, I want to make sure that I can keep my kid just as safe as I did at the last age and stage. What is that going to look like at this new age and stage where they really want to have some more individuality? And where that's important to their safety and everything else as well. Because one of the things that's really important that we teach our children, if they are going to be safe, is to teach them that they have a say over what happens to their bodies, and they have a say over what happens. They have choices in their lives. They need lots and lots of practice asserting themselves because, you know, whether they develop verbal skills or not, they're more likely to be physically assaulted. If a child has a cognitive disability, they're more likely to be assaulted physically and sexually. And they're going to need to be able to set boundaries.
To protect themselves on some level.
And if what's keeping them safe medically is to have them never have a chance, like anytime the child is protesting or whatever, then that's the child misbehaving. Anytime the child is willing to let you do something medical that's awful, the child is being good, then there's a certain lesson in that of I shouldn't be present with my own distress if something's upsetting, right?
Yep.
And so I think that in the ways that we help our children navigate the medical field and help them kind of navigate what's going on with them coming in and out of the hospital and also in their relationships with that.
In their development.
Part of what we need to do when considering what keeps them safe is not just consider how to make sure we can do the medical intervention, but also consider what are we teaching the child about themselves? What are we teaching them about what to do in relationship? Because they're not just learning